Today is a deeply personal podcast. It is something that I have carried with me for a very long time that is very much part of how I do business and how I coach people in their businesses, but I have not said it out loud more than a couple mentions here or there. And it's hard to believe that I've made it almost 100 episodes into this podcast without doing an entire episode just on this particular aspect. But today I'm going to do that. And it's not because I was hiding it. It was really more of this is deeply personal and I wasn't sure how it would land, what people would think. And that makes it a little bit of a risk, right? To talk to you. But I do believe that leaders go first. And if you have ever been afraid to speak your truth or share a part of yourself that you're worried that people will judge, then let this be permission to be your most authentic self. Let the parts of you that make you unique and the beliefs that you hold make you unique shine. And also look at how maybe they can shine through in business, because I think there's a beautiful piece that business works so much better when we are our most true selves. So we're going to dive in. Hey, you leader, entrepreneur, business owner, solopreneur, whatever you call yourself, we know you're a visionary business builder, wealth seeker looking to combine a passion for doing good with leading consciously. It's time to shift from a traditional focus of pure wealth accumulation to one that integrates well-being and fulfillment. You're here for a purpose, and it's time to shine your light. So here we go. Welcome back to the Conscious Edge podcast. I'm your host, Alecia St. Germain, founder of the Conscious Edge, where I help women entrepreneurs expand what they can hold emotionally, energetically, financially, so that business becomes sustainable and fulfilling. If you are new here, we put these podcasts out every single Tuesday, and we cover every aspect of being a human, building a business, and living this life. So that's anything from emotional to financial strategy to time management. It could be anything, but also there's a component of soul. So I do believe we are all here for a purpose. And as part of that purpose, we serve humanity. We serve this planet. We serve in this life. And so when you are doing your business from a perspective of, if I just do the thing, or this is what I'm supposed to do, and you don't do it from soul, it's much more challenging. Anybody who is a client of mine would tell you, and I say this, I've even said this on the podcast, that there are things in this world that I can explain. I don't know why they work, but I know when I lean in, it works better. We're going to do that today. So if you enjoyed today's podcast, make sure you hit the follow or subscribe button from wherever you are listening. And let's dig into this topic. At the Conscious Edge, I think of it as the convergence of science, soul, and strategy. So we look at our science piece where I bring immunity to change coaching methodology, which is put together by 2 Harvard professors. It's their life's work, and it is so incredibly powerful method of coaching. It reveals the big assumptions that you make about yourself and the way the world works and how you operate in it. It affects what you think, what you feel, how you act. And it helps you to move through what gets in the way of reaching your goals, or why we hesitate, or why you might feel uncomfortable making a podcast like this, or being visible, or making an offer, whatever it is. Wherever your resistance comes up, immunity to change does a wonderful job at having a very specific process for rewiring the brain. I have monthly money talks with Jen, Zen Jen as we call her, And I bring on some guests to talk a lot about strategy, the strategic pieces of business that are helpful for you. So we've got those pieces covered, but I've always talked about soul as kind of an invitation of kind of undercurrent, but never really have given it its place here publicly. It has its place inside my program, but not really. We haven't talked about it publicly. So this is where soul is finally going to get some methodology named, and I'll share with you my very personal journey around soul and invite you to explore what that looks like for you, because I think that part of why it's been so difficult to talk about the soul piece is that I believe that there isn't one right way to be in soul, to be spiritual, to be religious. And the more that I dive into different types of religions and spirituality and understandings, a lot of it seems like a different flavor of the same thing. I know there are nuances, but what I see sometimes is that it can create so much friction because people are looking for the one right way to do it. And I'm not really sure that there is. So today I'm going to share with you one aspect. It's not the only thing that I believe, but I'm going to share with you one aspect, and I'm going to invite you to consider what you believe and how soul plays into your business. So with my clients, one of the first things that we do is we go into a conscious edge deep dive where we look at really what is the soul aspect? What are the things that you have been called to do? How is your business set up around that? And a piece of that deep dive is what we call soul purpose. So soul purpose basically decodes a blueprint that is inside of your birth name. Your other names that you go by, so if you have a married name or another name that you have changed your name from, those have influence, but the idea is that each letter of your name is associated with a sound that is part of the 22 Hebrew letters from the Zephyr Yetzirah. And this is the code of formation. This is one of the oldest Jewish texts in Jewish mysticism. And this is the book of formation, essentially. And so the idea is that when God spoke, he spoke the word, and that creates. So our words have so much power in creating our reality, and your name is no different. So the soul purpose work is rooted in Dr. Frank Alper's work, who in the 1980s, this is kind of like a lost piece from Atlantean times, from like dating back into Moses. And so in the 1980s, Dr. Frank Alper channeled this work through Moses and created this spiritual numerology based on these Hebrew letters. So each of these 22 letters carries a vibration, and it corresponds to a code. And your birth name essentially maps out these codes in different ways. So essentially, spirit, soul, God, whatever your religion is that you subscribe to, whispers your name to your parents. They give you your name, and encoded in that are your gifts, your challenges that you have to work through, the goals, and your soul purpose, what it really is that you're here to do, here to learn, and here to be. And so everybody obviously has different names, different combinations of names, first, middle, and last. Some people don't have a middle. Some people get a middle name later. Some people change their name. Some people get a name at birth. Their parents change their mind and then change it to something else on the birth certificate within a few days of birth. So the way that these combinations come together is always so fascinating and unique to me. And here's the thing. I don't understand why this works. And I've done hundreds, maybe not hundreds, but upwards of over 100 to 200 of these readings, soul purpose readings. I don't understand why it works. I am a certified practitioner to do these decodings. And it's so fascinating for me that every time we engage in these really beautiful, rich conversations about what your purpose is here and what your experience in life has been, such a deepening. And it feels like such a privilege that I get to know people at such a soul level. And we have these wonderful conversations. A lot of times they confirm things that they have known about themselves, but have been too afraid to admit, or that they've dismissed. One of the things that I've learned is that we have these soul purposes encoded on us, but then we have a human experience, and our human experience and our brain puts wiring on top of this soul purpose that will cause us to struggle and cause us to hold back, cause us to dismiss the things that we truly do know in our hearts that we're supposed to do or experience or follow. And so our big assumptions really get laid over on top of that, and it has us playing smaller than our soul really wants. And so that's why the ITC work is so fascinating, is because when we discover what some of your challenges are, some of the things that need to be transmuted in order for you to fully express yourself in your soul's purpose, when we're able to use something science-backed and psychology-based to remove things like perfectionism and imposter syndrome and other things like that, when we're able to remove those, then you can really be the truest version of yourself. So they work really well together. And that's not necessarily how any of this is intended. And as we go through the podcast, I'll explain a little bit more why this makes sense and why the way that I see things fitting together is maybe a little different than how others might do that. So it was just so fascinating, because when I was coaching the exponential entrepreneur, I used to only do ITC work. And I had this thought, like, I really want to bring in some kind of profile. And I didn't want to do something corporate, like a disc profile or something like that. That didn't feel like the right fit. And then I looked into Enneagram and I looked at human design, some things like that. But I had a soul purpose reading done by a woman that I had met in a mastermind a couple years prior. And it was so spot on for what I felt called to in my business, why I excelled in coaching, what I believed about the world and the way that I existed in it. It was so spot on. And I remember going, I wish I could just do soul purpose inside of the exponential entrepreneur. I wish I could bring that element in. And I'm not even kidding you. A month later, the opportunity to be certified came into my inbox. And that is how my world has worked my whole life, is that there are these things that when they are truly aligned and it's the path that I know that I'm meant to be on, and I think that God wants me to be on, that the opportunity presents itself so quickly. And so I have really felt divinely led in a lot of the things that I have created, in all of the things that I really have created. So one of the things that happened to me really early on in my career, in my 20s, we have a physical life and we have a spiritual life. Our physical life is essentially your soul is born into your body, and it's like here trying to figure out how to be human. And it is part of why your younger years are so uncomfortable. We're not sure that we fit in. We're like fumbling our way through, making lots of mistakes. And it's really like the soul is given this human body and it's contained in this human body. And it's like figuring out how to be human. And then there comes this point in your life, usually in your late to mid 30s to mid 40s, where you feel this transition happen in your life. Some people do it younger, some people do it a little later, but you feel this transition where it's like everything that you've done to this point, you have this kind of awakening feeling. So if you're somebody listening and you have experienced this, or you might even be experiencing this now, I always find that women are coming to work with me right as they feel like they're in this transition point between their younger years and their older years. And so what happens is you transition from this physical life to now really into your spiritual life, which is where you are embodying what your purpose is. All the lessons that you have mastered. That's not wasted time. If you felt like I wasted a lot of my younger years, you didn't. Everything that you experienced and went through is likely part of setting you up for the lessons that you needed to learn so you could serve your highest purpose. So don't regret that. That's part of who you are, and it's made you who you are. So in my early life, I met success very young. I figured out entrepreneurship very young. I made more money than a lot of kids in their 20s. And I was visible. I was teaching. I just moved into this role of being a teacher very quickly. And right before I had my daughter, I had discovered the immunity to change work and that I wanted to do more than just teach people how to invest in real estate. I really wanted to work on the personal development side of things. And so that was another God moment for me, is like when ITC popped into my awareness. And I talk about that on a previous podcast. So I'll link that here in the notes if you want to know more about that part of it, the journey. So I knew I wanted to do that. And then I went and got certified. I had my daughter, and life got really difficult. And I made some big transitions in my choice to build the coaching business, let go of some lifestyle choices and some business choices that didn't serve me as a mother. And I had not built a business around. My business no longer served where I was in my life. What I now realize is it was really me moving into my higher purpose. And so I thought, oh, this will be easy. I will have no issue moving from, I'm already an entrepreneur. I already understand business. I already understand so many things. This is going to be easy for me to transition and build this coaching business if I just get some training, get some coaching from someone on how to do marketing. This is going to be very easy for me. And it wasn't. It was incredibly difficult for many years. And yet I knew so truly that I was on the right path. But I also had this piece where I felt like I lost my voice, from someone who used to teach so much to someone who felt like I really lost my voice. And a lot of imposter syndrome started to set in. I invested. I knew that I needed training and support and that I couldn't do it myself. So I invested heavily in coaching, and the debt started to become uncomfortable because the money going out wasn't matched with the money coming in. And that's very common for entrepreneurs to spend and go into debt to create something. That's part of the process very often. But I felt like it should have worked. Like if I just did the coaching, it should have worked. And yet, no matter what strategy I did, it never really seemed to click until I started getting a lot more into my own development, my own pieces of personal development and working through my imposter syndrome, but also working more into the spiritual side of things. And there have been so many times since I started this business that I will literally just pray, God, if you want me to keep doing this, throw me a bone. Please throw me a bone, because I don't know what to do next. And always that bone comes. It would come in the form of an email of a client who was so grateful for what I'm doing. It would come in the form of a new client. It was I always was given what I needed to continue the journey. And it has been that way the whole time. What I now understand, having soul purpose as part of my life, is that, and I'm going to talk about my codes. Your codes are going to be different. It's all based on your name And it's obviously a very complex thing. So I'm going to talk about it in the context of myself as kind of a demonstration of what soul purpose does. So what I learned was that one of the energies is a 3 energy. And the 3 is related to a poverty to wealth code. So it's a polarity code. So it's these extremes. And so in my younger years, I had 3s in my talent and a goal position. So for my younger years, which meant that I was great on stage. I was mastering being on stage. 3s are very expressive. They can communicate really well. They do have some challenges with worthiness. So as a 3 in my goal, I had to walk through some of the shadow sides of worthiness and really own who I was as in my younger years. So these are all things that I experienced that I had to, in order to fulfill my purpose in my younger years, which I do believe was the teaching and helping people build their own wealth and give them strategy for building wealth, that I had to work through my own shadow of being worthy, finding my voice, feeling enough. And all of that is related to the 3s. Interestingly, as I move into my older years, my 3 moved into a challenge position, which perfectly explains why it got harder. Like it was hard in my younger years because when something's in a goal position, you do have to walk through the shadow sides of it to get to the gifts of it. But then to have to deal with it again in my older years, well, it was because it moved to a challenge position. So in soul purpose, everything is charted on the star of creation. It's the Star of David. And so different positions within the star the numbers will show up and they correlate to whether something is a challenge, a talent, or a goal. And so it moved to a challenge position for me, which means that I'm really going to have to work even harder. So I went through becoming a mother, changing businesses, and working through worthiness yet again in these years. Now, I have, again, done a lot of this work, worked through a lot of things. And if you listen to the January podcast that Jonathan and I did about kind of what we learned, and it was like a debrief of 2025, I talked about leaving behind my imposter syndrome. Like one of the things I was leaving behind in 2025 was my imposter syndrome. So that to me was kind of like a bow on like leaving behind this challenge around worthiness and my 3s and some of the debts, getting in 2025, hiring Jen Boss to really help me budget. Because one of the things 3s need to do is they really have to be careful about their budgeting because they can go into debt. I have a couple of codes that are related to debt. So getting Jen in, all of that in 2025 really was this culmination of dealing with this challenge of this 3 energy. So it's really interesting to understand in the context of soul purpose why I was having this experience. Now, some of the other codes that show up in my profile and how they relate to business is one of them is I have an 8 as a dominant vibration. When you have something as a dominant vibration, it means it shows up in your chart more than 4 times or 4 times or more. So I have like 6 8s. Now, some people have a very large mix of codes in their profile. So there's 22 letters, 22 codes. And some people will have only a couple. If you have a lot of different ones, it means that you're maybe here to have a very varied experience and amass a lot of different little lessons here and there. If you have only a few, you're here to have a very specific experience. So I'm one of those people that's here to have a very specific experience. I only have a few codes and I have a lot of them. So I have like 4 3s, 6 8s, and a couple other numbers in there. So with 8 being my dominant vibration, this is a code that relates to humanitarianism. It helps me to see very deeply into people. It gives me a lot of emotional strength. It's a very grounded energy. And 8s are spiritual bridges. So they are individuals who can take like the physical of things and then bridge it to the spiritual or intangible in a way that makes people feel more comfortable. So many times, especially my listeners, more analytical, want hard proof, maybe even a little uncomfortable with the things they can't explain. And so I try to make that okay. I try to make that so that there are things that are rooted in science around religion and spirituality. But I think we're only at the very beginning of it. I think there's so much about this world that we don't understand. I mean, goodness gracious, Earth is a rock floating in space. And then there's this whole other part of like expansion that we can't even access. Like, if you don't think that's something otherworldly, I don't know what else is. So I think science really only touches on the very brief parts of this. So one of my gifts is to make that spiritual bridge and really illuminate that path. And I can hold both the physical and the spiritual life. I think that's part of what makes me a really great coach. I also think it's part of what makes me different than the average coach, because there's always been something about my coaching. My clients call it Alecia magic, but there's always been something about my coaching where it's intuitive and I ask really good questions. I ask hard questions and I can draw lines between things that seem very unrelated. But once I illuminate them or show them, they're like, oh my gosh, I don't know how you did that, but yeah, that resonates. So it's always been really difficult for me to explain what we do inside of the exponential entrepreneur fully, because some of it is just, I can't explain it. And so it's been really hard to own that, especially from a marketing standpoint, because marketing wants you to make it really tangible and it wants you to make it results orientated so that people like connect on the physical, tangible level. But so much of what we do isn't on the physical, tangible level. It's the science of the brain, which is sometimes a little bit challenging to understand. And that's why immunity to change is so great, because it brings a really tangible framework to something that is very abstract. But then on soul purpose, it also kind of brings a tangible framework to something that is very abstract, which is why that makes sense for me, because one of my other codes is a 4-4, which is a polarity code of infertility to fertility, or it's an abundance code. It's duplicating. So as part of my soul purpose can connect things and patterns. Like I was saying, I can take things that seem unrelated, but I'm very good at pattern recognition and even like a little bit of forecasting, being able to kind of see into what will happen next. And that's how I ask really good questions that kind of help people pull that information out of themselves. So it's all of these things together where we take the intangible and we have these methodologies that make them tangible and make them approachable and applicable to your real human life. And then the other piece is this big connection to nature. Both 8s and 4s have a huge connection to nature. If you've heard in prior podcasts, I've talked about, like, I have to put my feet on the ground. If I can't solve a problem, I got to go take a shower. Like, I need to touch water. So I'll like either take a shower or I'll like wash the dishes, and I'll get a lot of ahas or openings when my hands are in water. And so it's part of why the conscious seasonal planning that I was talking about a few episodes ago makes so much sense for how I build my business and how I coach my clients to build their business around the seasons in the year and being in relation with nature in how you actually go through the rhythm of your business. And then the overarching piece with a 3, poverty to wealth, and then the 4, which is the abundance code, which means duplicate. So being able to take information in, this is why I do really well with systems, is I take the information in, I can duplicate it out and show you how to apply it. Same thing with money, like bring it in, duplicate it, show you how to duplicate it. So bringing in the financial arc around money. I said this to Jonathan, I think this was also in the 2025 year in review. I have always felt called to help women around worthiness and wealth. And before I had Soul Purpose, I couldn't have told you why that was, but 3s are worthiness and wealth. 4s are abundance. So it makes sense, total sense to me why the Conscious Edge exists. And I do the kind of coaching that I do. And I do it in the unique way that I do it, blending science, soul, and strategy. I always talk about it being the place where the Conscious Edge being the place where modern science meets ancient wisdom and business gets soul. And that perfectly encompasses everything that we do. So that's the main parts. There's a couple other codes related to perfectionism in my chart. But other than that, that is the main things that really stand forward. I think the piece is that I was following an intuitive piece of building my business, but not realizing that there's an actual map encoded in my name that made it all make so much sense. And it was very validating. That's one of the things I think that a lot of the clients will say coming out of a soul purpose reading is, I just feel really validated. I'm excited. It's interesting. I've even had some people who are skeptical. They're like, I was being nice and I was skeptical, but then they'll come back to me a year later. And I remember one person told me, like, you told me I was going to be building physical structure, like I was going to be in some kind of, or that I might be inclined to physically build something. And I thought you were crazy. She was a real estate investor. I thought you were crazy. And she goes, and now I am building residential assisted living facilities. So like, she just found it so profound that something that she didn't even have foresight for, she remembered backwards that this was something that came as part of her goal. It was one of her goals in spiritual life. Here's the thing I want to say. I'm not saying you need this to build a great business. I'm not saying that this replaces strategy or nervous system work. I think they all work together. That's one of the things that I think makes the exponential entrepreneur so unique, is that there are places you can go to get strategy. There are places that you can go to do mindset work, but you don't often find a place where you can blend all 3. So really good sound business strategy meets nervous system work, brain rewiring and science, meets soul purpose and soul work. Also, there's another dimension I think that I really want to land with you, is that there's another dimension. And what I'm saying is your faith has a place in your business. It doesn't mean you have to lead with it in your marketing. It doesn't mean you have to come out as the Christian such and such. It doesn't mean that you have to use it in such a forward-facing way. But I do think it's part of who you are. And if your business is not aligning with what your religion or your faith is, and there's something that is out of alignment between what you do in your business and what you believe spiritually, there will be a conflict. And you won't show up the fullest, and you won't draw in the most money. And if you draw in the most money, but you aren't happy or spiritually or mentally fulfilled, the key may be in your faith is really the biggest piece. And I hesitate a little bit in sharing this because I know that people are very strong in their beliefs, in their faiths, but I feel so comfortable in this soul purpose work because the lineage runs from Moses. It comes from ancient texts. It's not something that someone went and just made up. I mean, I guess he could have made up if you don't believe that people can channel divine information, if you don't believe that there's access to something bigger, sure, you could say that this person made it up. That doesn't work for me. It doesn't make me a better person. I choose to believe this, just like anybody else would choose to believe in their faith, choose to believe in Christianity or Islam or whatever it is. That's a choice to believe that. And so I feel very comfortable here. It feels very supportive of anybody's faith or religion. When we do these Conscious Edge deep dives, I don't make anyone do a soul purpose reading with me. I say, this is an option. Here's what it is. If you don't feel like this aligns with your faith, then we won't do it. And that doesn't affect your experience in the exponential entrepreneur in any way, shape, or form. We will just lean more into your faith. And if you don't believe in anything, that's okay too. I think that someone who maybe I have worked with agnostic individuals, and I've worked with individuals that don't believe in anything, and they still get amazing results. I do think that those that are connected to a oneness, those that believe that they are here for a purpose and that we are all interconnected as humans and with nature, and that there is something bigger than yourself, that you have a richer experience. But that's totally up to you what you believe. So I'm not asking you to believe anything that isn't true for you. This is just my experience, what I believe, the way that I choose to live in the world, and to honor everybody's spiritual or religious beliefs. Because I think that when you lean into those and they're in the spirit of doing good, serving humanity, being a good steward to our planet, when you are operating from that very pure place, how could it be bad? How could it be wrong? Because I do believe there's more than one right way to do this. So soul purpose is currently something that's only available inside of my programs. It takes effort on my part to prepare a soul purpose reading. There's a few hours of prep work that happens before I even meet with you. And then there's our conversation. And then there's even follow-up conversations. What's fascinating is that over the years, so I had my soul purpose reading done probably 7 years ago now, or it might even, let's see, my son is, okay, so probably 7 or 8 years ago now. And what landed with me then is different than what has landed with me now. And it's only gotten richer. So oftentimes, if I go back into it and look at it with a client, we'll see different things, or different things will resonate with them differently based on what their current experience is. So I find that really fascinating. So it's only inside of my programs right at this point. I have contemplated doing some kind of VIP day where we would do a full one-on-one soul purpose reading, but then also integrate that with an immunity to change mapping session. So you could figure out like what your big assumption was that maybe makes, so the science piece that maybe makes really stepping into what your soul wants challenging, right? And figuring out kind of what is the framework that your brain put over top of your soul purpose that's limiting it. And so I've contemplated coming out with a VIP day where you could do both of those things with me in a day without needing to be part of one of my programs. I just don't have that put together yet. But I did want to give this lip service. I did want to talk about this soul piece that a lot of people, I think, hide their faith and they hold it back from what they do. And it's such an important part. Your soul is such an important part to your business, because when it's not in alignment and you're doing what you think you should and it's not what you believe, it's not going to work as well. It's not going to be as fulfilling. I think that when you do, how do I say this? I think it's probably a whole nother episode, but we don't just operate from soul though. We look at soul, but then we need to put the practical structure around it that makes good business sense. And some of what I see in manifestation practices and this idea of like, live like you are already abundant, live like you already have money. I think that causes a lot of overspending and some of the debt, some of the experiences that I have had in my attempt to practice abundance that have cost me. And so I want to be really clear that there is a piece of soul, but we put some construct around soul because soul has to live here in the human world. And so soul has to figure out how to build the business and how to do it within human constructs. And sometimes that becomes the challenge. So I wanted to give this some attention. I wanted to talk about this soul piece for you. What I would say to you is if this episode landed for you somewhere, like whatever that looks like, and you want to bring more of your faith, more of your soul piece into the business that you're building, and you want to put good human business constructs around it that work like we do in our financial capacity or financial leadership lab, and you want to handle the mindset pieces that maybe have put some limitations on what your soul is allowed to create in this world, then your next step is to book a conscious capacity assessment call with me. So we'll look at all the places where capacity is limited. Soul is a big piece of energetic capacity. So when we are out of alignment, we are leaking energetic capacity. It causes us to feel tired. It causes us to spin emotionally on things that are not for us. And it makes it hard sometimes to let go of things that are not for us and makes your calendar too full. So energetic capacity to me is at the base level of everything. So I invite you to book that capacity assessment call with me at consciousedge.com/capacity so that we can unpack it all, look at what the opportunities are for you and what it would look like to bring your business and your mind and your soul, so mind, body, and soul, all of it into alignment so that you can create a sustainable and fulfilling business. So that's all for me for now. And I wanted to just leave you with a question of what in your life have you been building maybe that feels a little out of alignment, or what would life be like if you built your business in alignment with soul? So with all of that being said, I'm sending you so much love, but make sure you hit subscribe or follow from wherever you're listening. And if Jonathan were here, he would say, be well. Thanks for listening to the Conscious Edge podcast. Make sure you subscribe and take a moment to be kind and share this episode with someone you care about. Leave a review to help us bring more compassionate leaders building businesses and creating wealth to the table. And for show notes, head over to consciousedge.com/podcast. This podcast and the linked materials are presented solely for general information, educational, and entertainment purposes and should not be taken as personal or medical advice or any kind of mental health treatment. Please consult a medical or mental health professional if you feel you need such services. Please be advised that all investing and entrepreneurial endeavors involve risk, and the use of the education and information on this podcast and linked materials is at the user's own risk.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM, women's voices amplified.